What happens when Hollywood's most respected gentleman finally loses his patience? For 94 years, Robert Duvall kept his mouth shut. He watched, he observed, he remembered every slight, every betrayal, every moment of disrespect. And then he spoke. The names he revealed will shock you to your core, because they weren't just anybody. They were legends, icons, his closest friends. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why one of cinema's greatest actors decided that enough was enough. Robert Duvall isn't your typical Hollywood hothead. This is a man who spent over 6 decades perfecting his craft without scandal, without drama, without public feuds. He's the gold standard of professionalism, the actor that other actors look up to when they need a lesson in dignity and discipline. But here's what nobody tells you about quiet people. When they finally break their silence, the earthquake that follows changes everything. And Duvall's revelation didn't just shake Hollywood, it exposed the dark underbelly of an industry that values profit over people, ego over artistry, and spectacle over substance. Today, we're diving deep into the 6 names that made Robert Duvall's blacklist. These aren't random colleagues or forgotten acquaintances. Every single person on this list played a pivotal role in Duvall's life and career, and every single one of them, according to Duvall himself, betrayed what cinema should truly represent. Buckle up, this is going to be intense.
Number 1. Al Pacino, When Brothers Become Strangers. Let's start with the most painful betrayal of all, the one that hits differently because it wasn't just professional, it was personal. Picture this. Early 1970s Beverly Hills. 2 struggling actors sharing a cramped apartment, splitting grocery bills, and dreaming about the day they'd finally make it big. They weren't just roommates, they were brothers in every sense that mattered. Robert Duvall and Al Pacino against the world, united by their love for the craft and their shared hunger for meaningful roles. These 2 men understood each other in ways that transcended words. They'd rehearse scenes together at 3 in the morning, challenge each other's choices, push each other to dig deeper. When one landed an audition, the other celebrated like it was his own victory. That's the kind of friendship that's supposed to last forever, right? Fast forward to the early 1990s. The Godfather Part III is greenlit, and suddenly, everything changes. The contracts arrive, and the numbers tell a story that no amount of brotherhood can erase. Al Pacino, $5 million plus 5% of the gross profits. Robert Duvall, $1 million. No percentage, no negotiation. Now, let's be clear about something. This wasn't just about money. Duvall had already proven himself as one of the finest actors of his generation. He'd won an Oscar. He delivered performances that critics still reference as masterclasses in subtlety and depth. But Paramount Pictures made their position crystal clear. You're not as important as Pacino. You're the supporting character to his leading man. You're expendable. Duvall did something that shocked everyone in the industry. He walked away. No tantrums, no public statements, just a simple fax that landed on Francis Ford Coppola's desk with a message that cut through all the Hollywood politics. I refuse to be anyone's backdrop. That single decision ended a 20-year friendship in an instant. What makes this story so devastating is what happened next, or rather, what didn't happen. Pacino could have stepped in. He could have told Paramount to balance the scales or lose them both. He could have honored that brotherhood they'd built together. Instead, he stayed silent. He cashed his check, he made the movie, and he let his friend walk away. Duvall retreated to his Virginia farm, seeking roles that felt authentic rather than chasing blockbuster paychecks. Meanwhile, Pacino became the face of Hollywood excess, shouting his way through films, turning intensity into parody. The divergence was complete. Years later, when reporters pressed Duvall about the split, his response was measured but devastating. You can't preach about family loyalty on screen while ignoring it in real life. Translation, Pacino was a hypocrite, and Duvall never forgot. Here's the kicker. When The Godfather Part III finally premiered, critics immediately noticed something was missing. The moral center of the Corleone family was gone. Tom Hagen's absence left a void that no amount of dramatic speeches could fill. The film suffered because Duvall wasn't in it, and everyone knew it. The final nail in the coffin came at the 2011 Oscar ceremony, a reunion of the Godfather cast. Both men attended, both men stood mere feet apart on that stage, and both men looked everywhere except at each other. No handshake, no acknowledgement, just two former brothers pretending the other didn't exist. That moment told the world everything they needed to know about how deep the wound had gone.
Number 2. Francis Ford Coppola, the teacher turned traitor. Losing a friend is painful. Losing your mentor? That's a different kind of devastation altogether. Francis Ford Coppola wasn't just a director to Robert Duvall. He was the man who transformed his career, who saw potential that others had missed, who gave him the role that would define an entire generation of cinema. When Coppola pointed at Duvall during the 1971 casting sessions for The Godfather and declared, "That's my Tom Hagen," he wasn't just filling a role, he was anointing a star. Their relationship during the early years was almost paternal. Coppola would spend hours explaining his vision, walking Duvall through the psychology of his character, treating him like a collaborator rather than just another actor on the payroll. Duvall soaked it all in, believing he'd found a creative partner who understood what cinema could be at its highest level. Then came Apocalypse Now, and everything started to crack. Filming in the Philippines was hell on earth, literally and figuratively. The heat was oppressive, the conditions were dangerous, the production was spiraling out of control. During one particularly brutal scene involving napalm explosions, Duvall collapsed from severe dehydration. His lips were cracked and bleeding, his body was shutting down. And Coppola's response? "Do it again, the lighting isn't right." Duvall, ever the professional, pushed through. He threw up blood between takes. He finished the scene. He delivered exactly what Coppola demanded. But something fundamental shifted in that moment. Duvall began to see his mentor through a different lens, not as a visionary artist, but as someone who would sacrifice anyone and anything for his vision. Brilliant, yes, but also cruel. The seeds of resentment were planted. Then The Godfather Part III came along and poured gasoline on that smoldering fire. When Paramount offered Duvall a fraction of Pacino's salary and Coppola didn't fight for him, didn't demand better treatment for the man who'd helped make his masterpiece possible, Duvall saw the truth. Loyalty only flows one direction in Hollywood. Coppola had used him, built his empire on his performance, and then discarded him the moment it became inconvenient to fight for fair treatment. Duvall's public statement was surgical in its precision. "I won't participate in a film about family if the people making it don't respect their own family." The subtext was unmistakable. Coppola had betrayed everything The Godfather was supposed to represent. Coppola tried to repair the damage. He sent handwritten letters. He attempted to call. He even reportedly offered to mediate between Duvall and the studio. But Duvall's silence was absolute. The student had learned everything he needed from the teacher, and now he was done. They never worked together again. They never reconciled. And when Duvall talks about Coppola today, there's no anger, just profound disappointment. That might actually be worse.
Number 3. Marlon Brando, when your idol becomes your enemy. Meeting your heroes is dangerous. Sometimes you discover they're even better than you imagined. But sometimes, and this is what happened with Robert Duvall and Marlon Brando, you discover that genius and character are two completely different things. Before The Godfather, Duvall worshipped Brando the way film students worship Citizen Kane. He'd studied on the waterfront until he could recite every line, every pause, every subtle shift in expression. Brando represented everything Duvall believed acting could be: raw, truthful, transformative. Meeting him felt like a religious experience. Then, Brando showed up on set. 2 hours late, a cigarette dangling from his lips, sunglasses indoors, 3 assistants trailing behind him, carrying God knows what. And just like that, the illusion shattered into 1,000 pieces. Brando refused to rehearse. He demanded that dialogue be written on cue cards and taped to walls, to furniture, even to other actors' backs. He would change lines without warning, derailing scenes that the cast had spent days preparing. What Brando called spontaneity, Duvall recognized as selfishness disguised as artistry. Duvall, who built his performances through discipline and meticulous preparation, watched in horror as Brando turned every scene into chaos. But here's what really burned. It worked. Brando's performance was magnetic, unforgettable, and iconic. He was simultaneously the soul of the film and, in Duvall's words, the enemy of every actor inside it. The real betrayal came with money, because it always does in Hollywood. When Paramount quietly paid Brando an additional $50,000 bonus that other cast members didn't receive, Duvall walked out of a press event in disgust. The message was clear. Some people play by different rules, and those rules have nothing to do with merit. Then came the 1973 Academy Award ceremony, and Brando found a way to make it even worse. Instead of accepting his Best Actor Oscar, Brando sent Native American activist Sacheen Littlefeather to refuse the trophy on live television as a protest against Hollywood's treatment of indigenous peoples. Half the country applauded his political courage. Duvall saw something different. A narcissist who had turned their collaborative work into their personal platform. "He turned our art into a publicity stunt," Duvall told a friend afterward. Whether or not you agree with Brando's message, Duvall's point was valid. Brando had made a unilateral decision that affected everyone involved with the film, without consulting anyone, without considering how it might impact his fellow actors. The final insult came decades later. When Brando died in 2004, Hollywood mourned. Tributes poured in from every corner of the industry. Memorial services were planned. And Duvall, he refused to attend. Instead, he reportedly sent Coppola a simple white card with 3 words, "Let it end." For Duvall, Brando represented everything toxic about Hollywood. The idea that talent excuses bad behavior, that genius justifies selfishness, that personal brand matters more than collective craft. The man who taught him about the possibilities of acting had also taught him about the corruption of the ego.
Number 4. Stanley Kubrick, the enemy of actors. Here's where things get really controversial, because Robert Duvall didn't just criticize Stanley Kubrick, he called him an enemy of actors, and he said it publicly, loudly, and without apology. At a 2010 Hollywood Reporter roundtable, surrounded by actors like Ryan Gosling and Jeff Bridges, Duvall dropped a bomb that silenced the entire room. To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy. I can point to movies he's done where you'll find the worst performances you've ever seen. The awkward silence was deafening. Gosling's eyebrows shot up. Bridges let out an uncomfortable laugh. But Duvall didn't smile, didn't backtrack, didn't soften the blow. He meant every single word. This wasn't a personal vendetta. Duvall never worked with Kubrick, never had a bad experience on set. This was philosophical warfare. Duvall saw Kubrick's notorious method of demanding 70, 80, or even 100 takes of the same scene as psychological torture dressed up as perfectionism. "How can anyone tell the difference between take 1 and take 70?" Duvall asked. It's a fair question. At what point does the pursuit of perfection become the destruction of performance? When does a director stop collaborating with actors and start breaking them down? Duvall's contempt solidified after watching the documentary Making the Shining. There's footage in that film that disturbs anyone who cares about actors as human beings. Shelley Duvall swinging a baseball bat 127 times while Kubrick coldly orders again after every take. Her exhaustion is visible, her emotional state is deteriorating, and Kubrick just keeps pushing. According to reports, Kubrick once invited Duvall to discuss a potential role in his never-completed film, The Aryan Papers. That meeting left Duvall cold, literally. He talked for 30 minutes about camera angles and lighting patterns, Duvall later revealed. Not once did he mention character, emotion, or truth. The air in that room was colder than a morgue. When Duvall told Esquire magazine that Kubrick was a genius without a heart, Hollywood collectively gasped. Kubrick was untouchable, a sacred cow that nobody dared criticize. But Duvall didn't care about the backlash. He saw Kubrick's films as technically brilliant but emotionally hollow.
visual masterpieces that treated actors like props in service of the director's grand vision. This stance cost Duvall relationships in Hollywood. Directors stopped calling, critics questioned his judgment, but he never backed down, never apologized, never softened his position. To Duvall, defending actors from directorial tyranny mattered more than maintaining his industry reputation.
Number 5. Robert De Niro, the Cold War of method acting. Here's the fascinating thing about the Duvall-De Niro rivalry. They never fought, never argued publicly, never had a dramatic falling out. Instead, they waged a decades-long Cold War through subtle jabs, carefully worded interviews, and pointed absences from each other's celebrations. On the surface, Duvall's assessment of De Niro sounds almost complimentary. He's good at playing Italians, very good. But anyone who understands Hollywood subtext knows that was a devastating critique. Duvall wasn't praising De Niro's range, he was implying De Niro didn't have any. Their philosophical divide runs deep. After The Godfather Part II put both men on the map as serious actors, they represented two completely different approaches to the craft. De Niro became famous for extreme physical transformations, shaving his head for Taxi Driver, gaining 60 pounds for Raging Bull, learning new languages, and changing his appearance beyond recognition. Hollywood loved it. Audiences couldn't get enough. But Duvall? He saw vanity masquerading as depth. The work isn't in the weight gain, Duvall said in an interview, his words dripping with barely concealed contempt. It's in the silence. Translation: De Niro was relying on external tricks because he couldn't access internal truth. All costume, no soul. While De Niro was praised for his methodical approach, Duvall quietly built characters through restraint, subtlety, and emotional precision. He didn't need prosthetics or dialect coaches or dramatic weight fluctuations. He just needed to understand the human being he was portraying, and that was enough. Duvall told colleagues that actors who worshipped at the altar of extreme method acting risked becoming parodies of themselves. Given De Niro's later career choices, Meet the Parents, Analyze This, and various comedies that seemed to mock his earlier intensity, Duvall's prediction proved eerily accurate. When De Niro started appearing in broad comedies, Duvall reportedly muttered, "There's the mask cracking." De Niro, to his credit, never took the bait. His public response was diplomatic to the point of being dismissive. "Bob's a serious actor. We just have different energies." That coolness only confirmed what Duvall already believed, that De Niro cared more about image management than honest conversation. For decades, they avoided each other at industry events. No photographs together, no joint interviews, no public acknowledgement of the other's work. It was a masterclass in professional estrangement, all the more powerful because neither man would openly admit the depth of their mutual disdain.
Number 6. Bruce Beresford, the Oscar that left a scar. Here's the ultimate irony. Robert Duvall won his first and only Academy Award working with Bruce Beresford on Tender Mercies, and he's hated the director ever since. Talk about a Pyrrhic victory. The film was a small, quiet drama about a washed-up country singer trying to rebuild his life in rural Texas. It should have been a career highlight, a moment of pure creative satisfaction. Instead, it became one of the most bitter experiences of Duvall's professional life. From day one, Beresford and Duvall clashed over fundamental aspects of performance. Beresford demanded endless retakes, constantly pushing Duvall to adjust his rhythm and timing. Duvall, who developed the character through months of research and preparation, pushed back hard. During one heated exchange, he snapped, "A drunk man never speaks slowly." Beresford refused to see his point. What happened next is the stuff of Hollywood legend and possibly career suicide for any actor less established than Duvall. Frustrated with Beresford's approach, Duvall secretly filmed one of the movie's most crucial scenes, the church performance, at dawn, without telling anyone on the production team.
No approval, no permission, just pure rebellion. That stolen take became the emotional centerpiece of the entire film. It's the moment everyone remembers, the scene that convinced the Academy to give Duvall his Oscar, and Beresford had nothing to do with it. When Tender Mercies won 2 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Duvall, the acceptance speech became Hollywood gossip for years. Duvall walked onto that stage, thanked the screenwriter, praised the crew, acknowledged the producers, and deliberately, obviously, pointedly skipped the director's name. The silence in that auditorium was deafening. The next morning, the Hollywood Reporter ran with the story. Duvall snubs Beresford at Oscars. The trades called it petty. Critics called it unprofessional. But Duvall didn't care. He later told Inside the Actors Studio, "Sometimes you have to choose between loyalty to your character and loyalty to someone else." In Duvall's mind, he made the right choice. Beresford's response was gracious on the surface, but clearly wounded underneath. "I respect him as an actor, but we can never work together again." They never did. The beautiful twist? Years later, Duvall wrote, directed, and starred in The Apostle, proving he didn't need directors controlling his emotions or second-guessing his instincts. He could tell his own stories on his own terms without compromise. That film earned him an Oscar nomination for both acting and directing. Message received: Robert Duvall answers to nobody.
So what does Robert Duvall's Blacklist really tell us about Hollywood? On one level, it's the story of a principled man who refused to bend, even when bending would have been easier, more profitable, and more popular. Duvall saw betrayals that others ignored, recognized disrespect that others tolerated, and called out behavior that everyone else excused in the name of genius or box office returns. But on a deeper level, Duvall's list exposes the fundamental rot at the heart of the entertainment industry. The way friendship becomes transactional, the way mentorship turns exploitative, the way art becomes secondary to ego, and the way actors are treated as expendable commodities rather than creative collaborators. Al Pacino chose money over brotherhood. Francis Ford Coppola chose convenience over loyalty. Marlon Brando chose ego over ensemble. Stanley Kubrick chose perfectionism over humanity. Robert De Niro chose transformation over truth, and Bruce Beresford chose control over trust. In every case, Duvall stood on the opposite side of those choices, and in every case, it cost him, professionally, personally, financially. But here's what the list really reveals. Robert Duvall values integrity more than success, principle more than popularity, and authenticity more than acclaim. At 94 years old, Robert Duvall isn't bitter, he's simply honest. And that honesty, that willingness to name names and call out the industry's sacred cows, might be his most important performance of all. If this video opened your eyes to the reality behind Hollywood's glamorous facade, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Robert Duvall's courage to speak truth to power deserves to be amplified. Drop a comment below and tell me, was Duvall right to burn these bridges, or did he take things too far? Should artists prioritize relationships or principles? I want to hear your take. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden stories that Hollywood doesn't want you to know, the feuds, the betrayals, the moments when the mask slips and we see the truth, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because trust me, we're just getting started. Until next time, remember, in Hollywood, everyone's got a price, except Robert Duvall. And that's exactly why his story matters.